Before the story begins, please write in the comments where you're watching from. Don't forget to like and subscribe so the channel Stories with Meaning can continue to grow and bring you more powerful stories. The salty air of the Southern California coast brushed against Emily Carter's face as she slid open the glass door to the back patio of her house. It was 6 a.m. The sun had just begun painting the sky in soft shades of gold and orange. In her hand, a cup of black coffee released thin curls of steam into the cool morning air. Emily took a long breath, letting the ocean scent fill her lungs. This had become her new morning ritual, one she'd only been able to enjoy for the past 3 months. This house, a modern minimalist structure dominated by white walls and warm wood accents, was a trophy, the prize of a long, lonely war she had fought entirely on her own. At 31, Emily had spent over a decade working overtime at an accounting firm in New York City, resisting the flashy lifestyle of her peers, saving every dollar she could. She walked through the quiet living room, her bare feet stepping across vinyl flooring she had installed herself just last weekend. Every corner of the house told a story of sacrifice. There was one fact she never denied. Her parents had helped her with $15,000 when she paid the down payment. At the time, her savings were locked in a fixed deposit that hadn't matured yet. But the house itself was worth over $1 million. That $15,000 was nothing more than a grain of sand compared to the hundreds of thousands Emily had poured into the rest. The remaining down payment, legal fees, property taxes, roof repairs, and a mortgage that consumed nearly half her salary every month for the past 5 years. "This is my house," she whispered, as if she needed to convince herself she deserved this peace. For years, Emily had been the family's cash cow. Since graduating college, she had paid for renovations on her parents' old house in a small town in Ohio, covered her father's overdue motorcycle payments, and funded Sophie's college tuition, her younger sister who skipped classes more often than she attended them. She did it all in the name of family duty. Buying this beach house was the first major thing she had ever done purely for herself. She had chosen a location far from the noise and chaos of the city, hoping that physical distance might finally create the boundaries she had never been able to set with words. That morning was supposed to be perfect. Her plans were simple: read a book, tidy up the front yard, maybe try a new grilled fish recipe for lunch. But the calm shattered around 10 a.m. The harsh roar of a diesel engine echoed from the gravel road leading to her property. Emily, who was trimming weeds in the front yard, straightened up. Shielding her eyes from the sun, she saw a yellow moving truck slowly backing into her driveway. The open cargo bed was piled with cardboard boxes, plastic wardrobes, and a foam mattress tied loosely with blue rope. Her heart sank. A bad feeling crept in instantly. The passenger door opened. Out stepped a middle-aged woman in a floral house dress wrapped in a red cardigan Emily recognized immediately. Her mother. Behind her jumps down a younger woman in denim shorts, sunglasses perched on her head. Sophie. Emily shut off the lawn trimmer. The sudden silence felt ominous. She walked forward, ripping off her work gloves. "Mom? Sophie?" Emily said flatly. "What are you doing here with a moving truck?" Her mother smiled broadly, a smile that might seem warm to outsiders, but to Emily looked calculated. Without answering, Margaret Carter turned to the driver. "Go ahead and unload the furniture," she said casually. "Put the mattress in the master bedroom facing the ocean. That one's for me." Emily's blood rushed to her head. "Wait, stop," she shouted, raising her hand toward the driver. "Don't unload anything." She turned to her mother and sister. "What is this? Why are you telling people to move into my house without asking me?" Sophie stepped forward, chewing gum, completely unbothered. "Oh, come on, Emily. Why are you being so dramatic? We're moving in. New York is suffocating. Mom needs fresh air. This place is perfect. Ocean views every day." Moving in? Emily let out a dry, humorless laugh. Who said you could move in? I never agreed to that. Her mother's expression hardened instantly, the familiar look of offense, the emotional weapon Emily had memorized over the years. Emily, Margaret said quietly, her tone sharp, you dare talk to your own mother like that? This is our house. Don't forget, your father and I helped pay the down payment. The words came effortlessly, twisting reality as if that contribution granted full ownership. Mom, that money was a tiny fraction, Emily replied, forcing calm into her shaking voice. I paid everything else, the mortgage, taxes, renovations. The deed is in my name. Tss, Sophie scoffed. So now you're counting pennies with your own family? Typical rich girl behavior. She turned to the movers. Just unload it. Emily's just tired. I said stop, Emily shouted. Birds scattered from the roof as her voice thundered across the yard. No one unloads anything, she said coldly, and you are not staying here. The yard froze. Only the distant sound of waves and the idling engine remained. Emily turned to the driver. Who hired you? The lady, he said, pointing to her mother. She said she was moving into her daughter's house. I'm the daughter, and I'm the homeowner, Emily replied, pulling cash from her wallet. This covers your fuel and time. Please turn around and take everything back, anywhere but not here. Sophie screamed and tried to grab the money. Emily slapped her hand away, effortlessly. Don't touch me, she hissed. Margaret shrieked, panicked and furious. I paid you. Don't listen to this ungrateful child. The driver hesitated, then shook his head. Sorry, ma'am. If the homeowner says no, we can't unload. That's trespassing. We don't want trouble with the police. He accepted Emily's payment and signaled his assistant. The truck began to reverse. Sophie pounded on the door, screaming insults. But it was over. Only the three of them remained. Margaret turned to Emily, tears streaming down her face, the kind Emily knew all too well. You humiliated me, she sobbed. I just want peace in my old age. Emily exhaled slowly. Mom, visiting is one thing. Showing up with the moving truck is an invasion. Sophie crossed her arms. Don't forget who begged for that down payment. Mom sold her gold necklace for you. Emily smiled bitterly. Let's do the math, she said calmly. That $15,000 was in 2018. In 2019, Dad's heart surgery cost $80,000 when insurance refused to cover it. I paid. In 2020, Sophie's college tuition was due, $25,000, because Mom lost the money in a scam. I paid. Last year, roof repairs, $40,000. Sophie's motorcycle payments, $1,500 a month for 2 years. Me. She locked eyes with her mother. That debt is paid, overpaid, so stop acting like you own my life. Margaret fell silent. Her favorite weapon, guilt, had shattered under facts. So you're keeping score with your own family now? She whispered venomously. Emily didn't flinch. For the first time, she stood on land that was truly hers.
Money can always be earned, Margaret Carter said sharply. But heaven lies beneath a mother's feet. If you drive your own mother away, your life will never be blessed. I'm not driving you away, Emily Carter replied. Her voice was hoarse now, trembling as tears pressed against her throat. She was hurt. Of course she wanted her mother to hug her, to be proud of her, not to squeeze her dry. I'm just protecting what is mine, Emily said quietly. Please go home. Calm down first. We're not going home, Sophie Carter snapped stubbornly. The truck is gone. Where are we supposed to sleep? There's a motel 3 miles from here, Emily answered coldly. Or you can order a rideshare to the train station. But you're not coming into this house today. Emily turned and walked toward the front door. She knew she couldn't look back. If she did, if she saw her mother's face, her resolve might shatter. Watch yourself, Emily, her mother screamed from behind. Don't expect me to speak to you again unless you apologize and kiss my feet." Emily reached the door. Her hand shook violently as she slid the key into the lock. She managed to get inside and locked the door behind her. She leaned her back against it and slid down to the floor. From outside came furious pounding and Sophie's curses. Emily closed her eyes and let the tears fall. She wasn't crying out of regret. She was grieving, because she realized that today she hadn't just lost her peaceful morning, she might have truly lost her family. After 10 minutes, the pounding stopped. Footsteps faded away, followed by the sound of a car ordered through an app. Emily stood, wiped her face roughly, and stared at the door lock. It was the standard lock installed by the developer. Her mother and Sophie had one dangerous habit. When they wanted something, they were clever. Too clever. Emily suddenly remembered something. When she first received the keys to this house, she had once left the spare key in the drawer of her old bedroom at her parents' house, just in case. She had forgotten to retrieve it when she moved out completely. Her heart started racing again. If they remembered that spare key, they could come back any time, when she was distracted or at work. "The locks," Emily whispered. "I need to change all the locks, now." She grabbed her phone and searched for the nearest locksmith who worked Sundays. This war had just begun, and her defenses had to be reinforced by nightfall. The locksmith's name was Mike Reynolds, a middle-aged man in a faded work vest who arrived on an old pickup truck about an hour later. Emily didn't want to take any risks. She asked Mike to replace not only the front door lock, but also the side door and the sliding glass door at the back. "You sure you want to replace all the cylinders?" Mike asked while unscrewing the stainless steel handle. "These locks are still new. Kind of a waste. Not cheap either." Emily stood beside him, arms crossed. Her eyes were swollen from crying earlier, but her gaze stayed sharp, constantly watching the street. "Replace everything," she said shortly. "Use the best system you have, one that's hard to duplicate. I'll pay whatever it costs." Mike nodded, sensing the urgency in her voice. He didn't ask any more questions. Soon, the sound of drills and clanking metal filled the house, a strange kind of noise that felt oddly comforting to Emily. Every tightened screw felt like another layer of protection for her sanity. While waiting, Emily sat on the couch and finally turned her cellular data back on. Her phone exploded with vibrations for nearly 2 full minutes, hundreds of notifications. Family group chat, happy big family, 156 unread messages. Her throat tightened. She opened the group with trembling fingers. Margaret, "Pick up the phone. Where are you now?" Sophie, "Emily, we got kicked out of the hotel because the credit card you gave Mom got declined. Did you block it? What the hell is wrong with you?" Margaret, "You ungrateful child. I pray your life will never know peace. Remember, God's blessing comes through parents." Aunt Nancy, Margaret's sister, "Emily, how could you do this to your own mother? She told me you threw them out like beggars. Shame on you. Come to your senses." Emily read her aunt's message with a bitter smile. Aunt Nancy, who never showed up when her father was hospitalized, who was nowhere to be found when Emily struggled to pay tuition, yet now, armed with a one-sided story, she had become a moral judge. The narrative had already been spread. Emily was the villain now. She didn't argue, she didn't defend herself. She knew it would be useless. Instead, she exited the group chat. Then she temporarily blocked her mother, Sophie, and Aunt Nancy's numbers. She needed sleep tonight, without the terror of constant ringing. She also froze the additional credit card she had given her mother for groceries, which had apparently been used to pay for a hotel. "Finished, ma'am?" Mike said, breaking her thoughts. He handed her a heavy, solid set of new keys. "This is a double lock system. When it's locked from the inside, the outside key won't turn, even if it matches. Very secure." Emily accepted the cold metal as if it were a protective talisman. "Thank you so much," she said. After Mike left, the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky darkened into deep purple. Emily closed all the curtains, turned on the porch light, and locked the doors. Click, click. 2 solid turns. That night, Emily didn't sleep in the master bedroom. It felt too exposed. She brought a blanket to the living room couch and placed a baseball bat beside the coffee table. The large house felt unnervingly silent. Every gust of wind against the windows made her flinch. Just past midnight, her fear proved to be more than paranoia. In the silence, she heard dragging footsteps on the porch, slow but unmistakable. Emily, who hadn't fully fallen asleep, jolted awake. Her heart pumped adrenaline through her veins. Holding her breath, she crept toward the front door without turning on any lights. She peered through the peephole. Under the dim porch light stood Sophie. Her sister looked disheveled, hair flat with sweat, still wearing the same clothes from the morning. Sophie glanced left and right, making sure no one was watching. Then she pulled something from her pocket. A key. Emily's blood ran hot, just as she suspected. The spare key. This wasn't a family visit. This was an attempted takeover. Emily watched as Sophie inserted the key into the lock. She twisted it. Nothing. She tried again, wiggling it harder. Still nothing. "Damn it," Sophie muttered. Emily could hear her curses through the thick door. Sophie pulled the key out, blew into the lock, then shoved it back in aggressively. Metal scraping metal sent chills down Emily's spine. "Why won't it turn?" Sophie hissed, frustrated, rising. She started kicking the lower part of the door. Another shadow appeared behind her. Margaret. The older woman looked exhausted, clutching a large handbag. "Can you do it?" she whispered. "No, Mom," Sophie replied panically. "I think she changed the locks. She's insane. Did it fast, too." "Try the back door," Margaret ordered. Emily backed away slowly, gripping the baseball bat tightly. She followed their footsteps to the dark kitchen. She waited. The sound of forced key insertion echoed at the side door. Again, failure. Mike had done his job perfectly. A loud bang hit the door. "Emily, open up!" Sophie screamed. "We know you're inside. If you don't open this door, I'm calling the police and reporting you for abandoning your own mother." Emily stood frozen. The threat was absurd, but still painful. She stayed silent. She knew responding would only confirm that they were getting to her. "Enough, Sophie, enough!" Margaret's voice finally broke. "She's really thrown us away. Let's go." "But Mom, where are we going to sleep? We're almost out of cash." "We'll go to the train station first," Margaret said coldly. "Tomorrow morning we deal with this. I won't let this go. She thinks she's someone special." Her voice turned icy with vengeance. "Tomorrow I'll make her regret being born." Their footsteps faded into the night. Emily collapsed onto the cold kitchen floor. Her hands shook violently as she dropped the baseball bat to avoid hurting herself. She was safe for tonight. The locks had saved her, but her mother's final words echoed in her mind. Tomorrow. Emily stared into the darkness. If physical doors were closed, her mother would attack through another entrance. Law, reputation. This was far from over. The real war was about to begin.
"Look at her face," Sophie Carter snapped bitterly. "So arrogant. She changed the locks last night so we couldn't get in, even though my mother paid the down payment for this house. We were freezing outside all night." Emily Carter took a long breath and met the police officer's eyes directly. "Officer, I respect your duty," she said calmly, "but that report is completely inaccurate. May I show you the legal ownership documents for this house?" She didn't wait for an answer. Emily stepped back inside and returned with the blue folder containing original documents. She handed them to the officer. "This is the property deed," she said, pointing clearly. "It's in my name only, Emily Carter. These are the mortgage payoff records, debited directly from my salary over several years." She flipped through highlighted bank statements. "And these are the property tax payments, all under my name." The officer examined the documents carefully, frowning as he reviewed the clean, undisputed deed. "There's only one owner listed. Ma'am, you claim you contributed to the down payment?" "Yes," Margaret Carter shouted from behind. $15,000. I sold my jewelry for it. She has no right to shut us out like this." Emily turned to her mother.
$15,000 out of a $1.2 million home, she said steadily. That's not shared ownership. That's family assistance, and I've repaid it many times over through monthly living expenses. She looked back at the officer. You're welcome to review my bank transfers. For the past 3 years, I've sent substantial monthly payments to my mother and my sister. The officer nodded. The situation was now clear. This wasn't a criminal matter. It was a family dispute driven by entitlement, not legal standing. Ma'am, the officer said firmly to Margaret, legally, this house belongs entirely to Miss Carter. Your name is not on the deed. As the lawful owner, she has full authority to decide who may enter the property. Changing the locks is within her legal rights. But I'm her mother, Margaret yelled, losing control. So the law protects an ungrateful child over her own mother? The law deals in documentation, the officer replied sharply. We cannot force Miss Carter to open her home. If you believe you are owed money, you may pursue a civil lawsuit. Filing a police report as if this were a crime is inappropriate. The officer then turned to Emily. Miss Carter, if this behavior continues, we recommend you file a counter-report for harassment or attempted trespassing. Seeing the police refuse to side with them, Sophie exploded. She lunged toward the front door and kicked one of Emily's flower pots. You think you're special because you own this place? I won't let you live in peace. I'll destroy your reputation. Sophie, the officer barked, we're still here. Do you want to spend the night in a holding cell? Sophie froze, breathing hard. Margaret stood silently, her face drained of color. Calling the police had backfired, humiliating her instead. The officers left after issuing a firm warning against any further aggressive behavior. The small victory felt bitter. Emily watched as her mother and sister walked toward their rented car. She knew this was only the end of one chapter. Before getting into the car, Margaret turned back. There were no tears now, only pure hatred in her eyes. You haven't won, Emily, she said coldly. I've already filed a report with Child Protective Services. I told them you abandoned your niece and that your mental state is unstable. Let's see if they still believe a so-called successful woman like you. Emily stood frozen on the porch. Her niece? Sophie did have a 3-year-old son, but the child lived in Ohio with their grandmother. Dragging a child into this conflict was the lowest blow Emily could imagine. Her hands clenched. At that moment, she stopped seeing them as family. They were adversaries, ones she would face with professional help. Emily pulled out her phone and scrolled to a contact. Daniel Brooks, attorney at law. Hello, Mr. Brooks. This is Emily Carter. I need immediate legal assistance regarding a family matter. I want to file a restraining order as soon as possible. The Cold War was over. Emily was ready for a legal counterattack. 2 days after the police incident, Emily worked from home nonstop, burying her anxiety in spreadsheets and reports. The fragile calm shattered when a silver government sedan stopped outside her wooden gate. 2 well-dressed women stepped out carrying folders with official seals. Emily exhaled slowly. Here it is, Child Protective Services. She greeted them on the porch, refusing entry until they presented official identification. Miss Emily Carter, we've received a report concerning the welfare of a child under your supervision. Emily forced a polite smile. Which child? She asked calmly. I'm unmarried and live here alone. The officer frowned and opened her file. The report states that your niece, the son of your sister Sophie Carter, has been left unsupervised in this residence. It also alleges that you exhibit emotional instability that may endanger the child. Emily's blood boiled. This wasn't just a lie. It was an attempt to fabricate a criminal narrative. My niece has never lived here, Emily said firmly. She resides in Ohio. I do help financially, but the child has never set foot in this house. She took a breath. Please, come in. I'll show you. The officers inspected every room. The house was spotless, orderly, clearly occupied by one adult. No toys, no baby bottles, no diapers, nothing. As they prepared to leave, the officer who had spoken earlier looked uncomfortable. We apologize, Miss Carter. We're required to respond to urgent reports. The caller, identifying herself as your mother, claimed you were suffering from severe depression. I'm not depressed, Emily replied, locking eyes with her. I'm protecting my property from an exploitative family. May I have a copy or reference number for this report? I intend to file a complaint for false reporting." The officer hesitated, then handed her the case reference number. "You can follow up through our legal department." After they left, Emily felt no sadness, only cold, focused anger. Her mother had weaponized a government agency against her. This was no longer about a house. It was about destroying her name and career. Emily immediately called her attorney. "They've started filing false reports with government agencies." "Good," Daniel Brooks replied calmly. "That actually strengthens our case. False reporting is a criminal offense. I've prepared the defamation claim and restraining order request. We'll file them today." "Do it," Emily said firmly. "No delays." That night, Emily stood on the upstairs balcony watching the waves collide under the moonlight. She realized the family that should have been her harbor had become the most destructive storm. But like the rocks battered endlessly by the sea, she would not move. She deleted the family photo from her profile picture and replaced it with a calm image of the open ocean. A silent declaration. From today on, her world belonged to herself, alone. But beyond the fence, in the darkness of the road, a shadow lingered. Sophie wasn't done. If the law couldn't help her, she would turn to something dirtier, something she'd learned from the streets. After the CPS visit, Emily understood that her beach house, once a sanctuary, had become a fortress under siege. Sleep no longer came easily. Every creak of wood, every hiss of wind through a crack in the window made her heart race. That night, a light rain blurred the ocean view. Emily was about to turn off the living room lights when she heard something unusual. Not a car engine, not footsteps, a soft metallic scraping near the kitchen. Scrape, crack. It came from the small window above the sink, hidden by thick frangipani trees. Emily didn't scream. She had trained herself for moments like this. She quietly grabbed her phone and opened the CCTV app connected to the hidden side yard cameras. On the dim screen, she saw a figure perched on the concrete fence, prying at the window bars with a large screwdriver. It was Sophie. She wore a black hoodie. Her face looked feral under the weak garden lights. Sophie didn't know Emily had installed additional cameras just a day before. Emily pressed the emergency button in her home security app, directly connected to the nearest police monitoring unit. Then she walked toward the kitchen without turning on the lights. She wanted to see how far her sister would go. The glass cracked. Sophie reached inside, trying to unlatch the window. "What do you think you're doing, Sophie?" Emily's voice cut through the darkness, cold and sharp like a blade. Sophie jerked in shock, nearly falling from the fence.
She saw her older sister standing in the darkness of the kitchen like a ghost. Instead of running after being caught, Sophie Carter burst into hysterical laughter, a laugh fueled by desperation and jealousy that had finally boiled over. "Open the door, Emily, open it," Sophie screamed while repeatedly slamming the window with a screwdriver. "Mom collapsed because of you. She fainted at the hotel after you blocked her credit card. What are you trying to do? Kill her? Huh? Give me money or I'll destroy this house." "Did she really faint?" Emily Carter replied coldly, without a shred of pity. "Or is this just another performance? Get down from there, Sophie. The police are already on their way." "You're lying. You're bluffing," Sophie shouted, striking the iron bars with manic force. "This house is the result of our family's sacrifice. You don't deserve to live happily here while we suffer." At that exact moment, blue and red emergency lights reflected off the exterior walls. The wail of police sirens grew louder. Sophie froze. Her eyes widened in terror as 2 patrol cars and a private neighborhood security motorcycle stopped right in front of the gate. "Do not move. Get down immediately," a police officer ordered through a loudspeaker. Sophie tried to jump down toward the outside, but her foot caught on creeping vines. She crashed hard onto the wet ground, landing right at the feet of 2 officers already in position. Emily turned on all the lights in the house, illuminating the scene clearly. She opened the front door and walked out calmly. She saw her sister in handcuffs, her face smeared with mud and rainwater, pitiful and frightening at the same time.
Miss Carter, one officer said, we caught her in the act of attempted break-in and property damage. We have the screwdriver as evidence, along with visible damage to the window. I also have video footage, Emily said flatly, handing over her phone. Sis, please help me, Sophie pleaded instantly, switching tactics. Don't let them take me. I just wanted to talk. I love you. Emily looked at Sophie with a gaze she had never used before, empty, distant, as if Sophie were nothing more than a stranger passing on the street. You stopped being my sister the moment you tried to report me to Child Protective Services with fabricated accusations, Emily said slowly. Take her away, officer. I will pursue this legally. There will be no settlement this time. As the police car pulled away with Sophie inside, a taxi stopped nearby. Margaret Carter, their mother, rushed out. Seeing her youngest child being taken away, the elderly woman screamed hysterically, chasing the police car while hurling insults at Emily, who stood firm at her doorway. Emily, you're a demon! You put your own sister in jail! Margaret shouted from behind the gate. Emily said nothing. She went back inside, locked the door, and for the first time in her life, felt no guilt at all. She realized that letting them escape consequences again and again was the reason they had turned into monsters. Tonight, one monster had been contained, and she would not hesitate to face the next one in court. The news of Sophie's arrest spread faster than wildfire. The next day, Emily's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Distant relatives who usually appeared only during holidays suddenly became moral experts in social media comments and private messages. Margaret didn't stay silent either. With Sophie now in temporary detention, her mother launched her most reckless attack yet, a civil lawsuit claiming partial ownership of the house and a defamation complaint. 1 week later, Emily sat in the conference room of Bascaro and Associates, her attorney's office. Legal documents were stacked in front of her. They're serious, Mr. Bascaro said, adjusting his glasses. Your mother's claiming implied ownership. She argues that the $1,500 she contributed years ago wasn't a gift or loan, but a joint investment. She's demanding 50% of the current property value, or lifetime residency rights. Emily leaned back. She looked exhausted, but her eyes remained sharp. An investment of $1,500 for a house now worth over $1.2 million, and she wants half? Even basic logic doesn't support that. True, Bascaro replied, but in court they'll play the emotional card. Family witnesses will testify that you abandoned your mother after becoming successful. I'm ready, Emily said firmly. I have 5 years of monthly transfer records, hospital bills I paid for my father, and I have audio recordings of Sophie threatening to destroy my house. The first mediation session took place 2 weeks later at a county courthouse. The atmosphere turned icy the moment Emily entered. Margaret sat there with a young, ambitious lawyer. Behind her, a few aunts and cousins stared at Emily with judgmental eyes. Emily, Margaret began, her voice trembling theatrically before the mediator. I don't want much. I just want to live in that house. It was built with our shared sacrifices. Why are you so cruel, jailing your sister and throwing your own mother out? The mediator turned to Emily. Miss Carter, is there room for reconciliation? Emily stood. She didn't look at her mother, only at the mediator. Your Honor, she said calmly, peace requires honesty. My mother claims shared ownership based on $1,500. I have proof that I repaid that amount more than tenfold through living expenses, health care, and debt settlements. She placed a thick folder on the table. As for my sister, she was arrested for attempting to break into my home at night with a weapon, a screwdriver. That is criminal act. I cannot reconcile with someone who endangered my life, even if she is my sister. Margaret's lawyer tried to interrupt. Your Honor, my client is an elderly parent. Ethically, we are here to discuss law, not distorted ethics.
Mr. Bascaro cut in sharply. My client fulfilled her moral obligations until she was financially and emotionally exploited. The mediation failed. Outside the courtroom, Margaret erupted, screaming that Emily was a cursed daughter, drawing a crowd. Emily walked past her family without turning back. In the parking lot, Aunt Nancy blocked her path. "So you really have no heart? Your mother is under extreme stress. Drop the charges against Sophie, or we all cut ties with you." Emily stopped, smiled thinly. "Cut ties, Aunt Nancy. You only ever contacted me when you needed money you never repaid. If that's the price of my peace, cut ties today." She got into her car and shut the door. In the rearview mirror, she saw her mother crying hysterically in relatives' arms, a convincing performance for outsiders, hollow to someone who knew the truth. The civil trial dragged on for weeks. The courtroom became a place where blood ties were stripped down to the bone. Margaret's strategy was predictable. 3 relatives testified that Emily had changed after becoming wealthy and had deceived her parents about the house. "She promised it was for my retirement too," Margaret sobbed before the judge. But in the digital age, emotional narratives often lose to cold digital trails. When it was Emily's turn to present evidence, Mr. Bascaro delivered the final blow, not just bank transfers, but audio recordings and family group chat screenshots from the past 3 years. "Your Honor," Bascaro said, playing an audio file, "it was Margaret's voice, recorded accidentally a year ago." "You must send $2,000 for the roof. Don't be stingy. That beach house is just for showing off anyway. I don't need to live there. I just want the money." The courtroom fell silent. Margaret's face drained of color. Emily stood for her final statement. "I love my family, but love should never become financial enslavement. I've given them a home in Ohio. I funded their lives. This house is my final boundary. If I surrender now, I'll have nowhere left for myself." The judge struck the gavel. The ruling was decisive. Margaret's lawsuit was dismissed in its entirety. The court ruled that the $1,500 contribution, given the overwhelming proof of repayment, was a family gift, not an investment, and carried no legal weight against Emily's valid property title. Margaret's carefully crafted image as a victim began to collapse both in her old neighborhood and online. The second blow came from law enforcement. The false report filed with Child Protective Services was processed as a counter-report. Emily chose not to pursue jail time, but Margaret received a formal warning and a permanent police record. Meanwhile, Sophie remained behind bars awaiting her criminal trial. Without Emily's financial support, they couldn't afford a high-priced attorney. The young lawyer who once represented Margaret withdrew after unpaid fees. As Emily exited the courthouse, her mother tried to approach her one last time. And this was where the past finally ended. Not with anger, but with a face shattered by shame. "Emily, please help her. She can't survive in there," Margaret whispered weakly. Emily stopped for a moment and looked at the woman who had given birth to her. There was a sharp ache in her chest, but then she remembered the shattered window, the broken door, and the vicious lie about child neglect. "You were the one who taught me that every action has a price," Emily said quietly. "Sophie has to learn to take responsibility for her own choices. And you, Mom? Maybe it's time for you to learn how to live with what you have, not with what you can take from me." Emily walked away, leaving her mother standing alone in the cold courthouse corridor. For the first time, Emily didn't turn back to see whether her mother was crying or not. She had seen enough fake tears. Now she only wanted to see her own future. The consequences of the courtroom defeat turned out to be far greater than just legal trouble. News of Margaret's loss and the audio recording played during the trial began to circulate among neighbors and distant relatives. The world Margaret had built on a foundation of image and victimhood slowly collapsed. Back in her old house in a small town in Ohio, whispers began.
Neighbors who had once sympathized now felt deceived. They realized that the woman who claimed to be betrayed by her daughter was actually someone who had aggressively demanded tens of thousands of dollars. Margaret lost her stage. She rarely left the house anymore, avoiding the judging looks of those who once attacked Emily based on her stories. Sophie's fate was far harsher. The criminal trial for attempted burglary and property damage finally concluded. Emily attended the hearing, sitting in the very back row. She saw Sophie, thinner now, dressed in an orange detention vest. No arrogance, no sunglasses, only a frightened young woman. The judge sentenced her to 8 months in prison, citing strong physical evidence and CCTV footage that showed clear intent and escalation. 8 months, Margaret whispered from the front row, then collapsed onto the courtroom floor. Emily watched from a distance. Relatives rushed to help her mother, but this time Emily didn't run forward. She stayed in her seat, breathing deeply, realizing this was the bitter medicine her family needed to stop living as parasites. After the hearing, Emily walked toward the parking lot, but stopped when she saw Aunt Nancy standing near her car. Her aunt's face was no longer angry, just confused and anxious. "Emily," she said quietly, "Sophie now has a criminal record. She'll struggle to find work. Her future is ruined. Are you satisfied?" Emily looked at her calmly. "I didn't ruin her future, Aunt Nancy. She did that herself the moment she picked up a screwdriver and tried to break into someone's home at midnight. If it had been a stranger's house, things could have been far worse. But she's your sister." "Exactly," Emily cut in. "Because she's my sister, she needs to learn that the world has rules. All of you spoiled her because I was always there to clean up the mess. Now I'm not. Stop blaming me for your failure to raise her." Aunt Nancy fell silent. She realized the obedient niece she once knew had become a woman with unbreakable principles. 1 week after Sophie's sentencing, Emily received a final letter from her mother's lawyer. Margaret formally requested monthly financial support as an indigent parent. Emily smiled faintly as she read the letter in her ocean-facing home office. She called Mr. Bascoro and gave her final instruction. "I will continue sending money each month for my mother's basic needs, food and health care, but only at a modest standard appropriate for life in Ohio, not for luxury, not to pay Sophie's debts. And one condition: the money will go through a court-appointed guardian foundation or a third-party account you designate. I want no direct communication." Emily drew a clear boundary. She still fulfilled her basic duty as a daughter, but she withdrew all emotional access. She was paying for peace. That night, Emily sat on her porch. For the first time since the moving truck arrived, the house felt truly quiet. A peaceful silence, not a threatening one. Behind the concrete fence, now reinforced with decorative barbed wire and a modern alarm system, she felt safe. But the calm had only just begun. She still had to learn how to live alone after a lifetime of being surrounded by other people's demands. In the months after the legal storm passed, Emily entered a quiet transition. The beach house on the Southern California coast became hers in every sense, legally, physically, and emotionally. But freedom felt unfamiliar. For years, her identity had been shaped by her role as the family's rescuer. Now that role was gone, she had to rediscover who she really was. She began doing small things she once considered luxuries. She planted lavender and rosemary in the backyard, letting their scent calm nerves that had been tense for years. She started meditating every morning, accompanied only by the sound of waves, no longer threatening, just present. The outside world, however, wasn't finished with her yet. One afternoon, while Emily was working at a local cafe on a client report, a woman approached her, a former neighbor of her mother from Ohio. The woman hesitated, then sat down. "Emily, how are you?" she asked politely. "I'm fine," Emily replied calmly. "Is something wrong?" The woman sighed. Your mother, she's changed a lot. She barely talks to anyone now. Sophie's still inside, right? Word is your mother plans to sell the house in Ohio to pay off Sophie's debts. Apparently, they're everywhere. Emily sipped her coffee unfazed. That's her right, she said. The house is in her name. But if she sells it, where will she live? Don't you want to take it over? Emily set her cup down. I already gave that house to her completely. What she does with her assets now is her responsibility. I can't keep being a safety net for their bad decisions. The woman nodded slowly. Yes, people back home have heard about the trial. They actually feel sorry for you now. Turns out you were carrying everything alone. That sentence brought Emily a quiet sense of relief. The truth had surfaced on its own, without needing to shout it. Her mother's destroyed credibility wasn't Emily's doing, but the inevitable collapse of lies that could no longer support reality. That night, Emily received an email from Mr. Bascoro. Sophie had applied for sentence reduction, but it was denied due to poor behavior in prison. She had reportedly been involved in frequent altercations, proof that her temper hadn't changed even behind bars. Emily closed her laptop and walked toward the large glass window overlooking the sea. She used to believe she had to fix everyone, that she was responsible for her mother's happiness and Sophie's future. Now she understood a painful but liberating truth. You cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. She took out an old notebook and wrote one sentence on the first page. My happiness is not a betrayal of my family. Emily began planning her new future. She decided to take an extended leave from her job in New York City and start an independent consulting practice from her beach house. She wanted to build a life driven not by fear or guilt, but by peace. A small surprise awaited her. The next morning, while checking the mailbox by the gate, she found a worn envelope with no sender. Inside was a single piece of paper written in shaky handwriting. Emily, I'm sick. I need my usual heart medication. Please. Emily stared at the note for a long time. She knew it could be another manipulation tactic, but this time she didn't panic. She didn't rush over. She didn't call. She took her phone, contacted the local pharmacy near her mother's home, paid for the medication online, and asked them to deliver it directly by courier. She didn't reply to the letter. She helped, but she no longer gave herself. The boundary remained firm, as solid as the concrete fence protecting her beach house. That letter was Margaret's final attempt to pull Emily back into emotional dependence. Emily's response, mechanically paying for the medication without a single word, sent a powerful message. She still had humanity, but she no longer had room for manipulation. Weeks passed without further attacks. The silence itself became a new challenge. Emily learned to make peace with healthy solitude. She joined a local coral reef conservation community, meeting people who didn't know her as the ungrateful daughter or the family's ATM. They only knew her as Emily, a strong woman who loved the ocean. One afternoon, while planting coral seedlings, a fellow volunteer said, "You seem very calm today, Emily, like you've just let go of something heavy." Emily smiled, gazing at the clear water. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean going back to how things were, softly. Sometimes forgiveness means letting go, so both sides can grow, even if it's on different paths. And yet, reality knocked once more. Aunt Nancy called again, this time with a much lower voice, almost pleading. Emily, the house in Ohio has been sold.
Your mother is living in a small rental near the market now, Aunt Nancy said quietly. She often stares off into space. The money from selling the house is gone. Sophie spent it on payoffs, under-the-table fees, and old debts we only just found out about. Aunt Nancy paused, then continued, her voice hesitant. Sophie will be released soon, but she has nowhere to go. Don't you feel sorry for her? Emily Carter fell silent. She pictured her younger sister breathing free air again. 8 months in prison should have been a lesson,
But from Aunt Nancy's story, Sophie hadn't changed at all, still believing money could solve everything. "Aunt," Emily finally said, her voice calm and steady, "my sympathy burned to ashes the night Sophie tried to break into my house with a screwdriver. As for housing, I bought a small studio apartment under Mom's name last year. You remember. It's an asset I legally locked so it can't be sold. Mom can live there. But Sophie? She has to find her own way. She's an adult." "But she's your sister, Emily." "That's exactly why," Emily replied firmly. "If I let her back into my home, I wouldn't be helping her. I'd be destroying my own life. Please tell Mom the apartment is secured and all legal documents are with Mr. Harrison, my attorney. She can pick them up there. That is the last material duty I will fulfill as a daughter." Emily ended the call before Aunt Nancy could argue further. Her hand trembled slightly, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was resolve. The next day, Sophie was officially released. Emily learned about it through the legal notification system she monitored. She upgraded her home security one more level. She didn't want surprises in the middle of the night. But what arrived wasn't a physical attack. That afternoon, a taxi stopped in front of the gate. Sophie stepped out. She looked nothing like before. Her once dyed hair was dull, her face thin, exhausted, unkempt. She stood in front of Emily's tall wooden gate, staring inside. Emily watched through the CCTV camera. Sophie stood there for a long time. Her hands gripped the bars, but she didn't shout. She didn't curse. She just stared at the house with an expression that was hard to define, a mix of resentment, regret, and envy that hadn't fully died. Emily made a decision. She went outside. She didn't open the gate. She stood behind the solid iron bars. "What do you want now, Soph?" Emily asked flatly. Sophie flinched, startled to see her. For the first time, no insults came out of her mouth. "Mom's sick, Em. You really going to make us live in that cramped apartment?" "That apartment is decent and far better than a prison cell. If you want a better life, get a job, start from zero, and don't ever step onto this property again. If you do, the restraining order prepared by Mr. Harrison will take you straight back to the police station." Sophie glared at her, hatred flashing in her eyes, but fear was there too. She realized the sister she once manipulated with tears had become a stone wall she could no longer break. Without another word, Sophie turned around and got back into the waiting taxi. Emily exhaled deeply as the car disappeared around the bend of the coastal road. The shadow was finally fading. She understood then that breaking a toxic cycle wasn't just about changing locks. It was about changing how she saw herself. She was no longer a servant to her family's demands. She was the owner of her own life. That night, Emily slept deeply. No nightmares. Only the sound of waves carrying her into rest. She knew a true new chapter had just begun. 1 year passed. Time was no longer something Emily measured by mortgage payments or deadlines, but by healing. The beach house on the Southern California coast had truly become a home. Not a trophy, not a fortress, a place to breathe. The front yard bloomed with tropical flowers. On the back terrace, Emily built a small studio where she ran her independent financial consulting business. Her relation with extended family settled into a cold but stable balance. Her mother, Margaret Carter, lived in the studio apartment Emily provided. Margaret still occasionally sent messages complaining about her health or asking for extra money. Emily responded professionally, through Mr. Harrison. Medical expenses were covered through private insurance. Drama? Not. As for Sophie, the last Emily heard, her sister worked retail jobs, frequently quitting or being fired due to her inability to accept authority. Without unlimited financial backing, Sophie was forced to survive, a bitter reality she should have learned 10 years earlier. One bright afternoon, Emily sat on a small wooden pier not far from her house. In her hands was a brown folder just delivered by courier. Inside were official documents, tax clearance letters, and fully updated property ownership papers, completely free of legal burdens. She remembered the night she once sat on her kitchen floor, gripping a baseball bat, shaking in fear. She smiled softly at how far she had come. Happiness isn't about having everything. It's about the courage to say enough to what destroys us. In her new community, Emily was no longer known as the stingy, successful daughter or the ungrateful child. She was known as an independent woman, generous to the local community, often helping fishermen manage their finances, and someone who always made time to watch the sunset. She learned that being kind does not mean being weak. Being family does not mean allowing yourself to be exploited. She had built her boundaries, as strong as the coral cliffs protecting the shoreline from crashing waves. The sun dipped low, painting golden lines across the water. Emily stood, straightened her clothes, and walked back toward her house. The house she bought with her hard work, defended with her courage, and now lived in with peace. She locked the door not because of fear, but because she knew exactly who was allowed inside her world. The living room lights turned on automatically, warm and welcoming. At 32 years old, Emily Carter had finally come home. She had won the hardest battle of her life, the battle to own herself.